Let's get started. This is Dennis Ojima here at the North Central Climate Science Center, and Robin O'Malley's here, and he's going to sort of introduce the topic.
Okay, so I think this is my first of these calls, and I think it's maybe a little bit different from the normal call, just by way of we're operating in a strange environment, not only because I'm here, but because there's a lot of other things that are going into sort of what's happening right now. And so let me just say a couple things about the sort of context that we have, that we're operating in, and what it's like we're going to be facing as we go ahead. But let me start with a little bit of thoughts about my role. I'm here at least until July 15th, ostensibly. USGS has a history of extending details, so I'm not banking on heading back east at that point. And so I think I view my role as mostly trying to navigate us through what is going to be a complicated and unusual budget cycle, and getting us to the point where we get a director and all the things that Jeff had got in motion and all of you have got in motion, continue to do that and move forward without a whole lot of disruption. Usually enacting doesn't go off on new strategic directions, but I think I'll probably be nudging a little bit some directions that Jeff and I have sort of worked on together, and so they'll be consistent, but there may be some new signals, and as we get towards the end of this, you'll see a little more of that. So I think we can go to the second slide. Yeah.
Well, let me just add something. I mean, I think from the North Central Climate Science Center's perspective, having Robin serving as acting director during this time period, based on his experience at NICWIS, our headquarters in Reston, is actually very, very helpful because he knows sort of strategically what is envisioned for the enterprise overall. And I think getting him involved with sort of more down in the weeds of what a region does, in particular our region, I think we're really fortunate to have his background and experience to help guide us through this transition period. So I think we will see, I guess, our operational structure move forward much of a hiccup. Because of that, he's knowledgeable of who we are, and now getting up to speed on the details. And this, this presentation will kind of map out how we envision the next 6 to 18 months will be like.
Hey, Dennis, Andy Hansen here. Just a quick note that I'm not able to see the presentation. It says waiting for the host. I don't know if everybody else has that same problem.
This is Lawrence. I can see it fine. I'm running the temporary application. I didn't do the full install.
Yeah. Are you in Aparna Bamzai's personal room? You're not using an old one of Jeff, are you, Andy?
No, I'm using the new one.
This is Diane. I'm having the same problem. So can you send out an email about which the link is?
I had to actually cut and paste it, not click on the link. When I clicked on the link, it took me to the old one, even though it says the new one.
I'll try that. Does it matter if you're in Chrome or Internet Explorer? Because I cut and pasted into IE, and it's just sitting here spinning.
Yeah, supposedly IE is a better one to use than Chrome for this. But yeah. Sorry, guys. Try to cut it and paste it and see it.
So the cut and paste is working for me.
Okay.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Amanda.
I'll make a note on that link.
Dennis, one other thing. I hate to say it, but I've got a webinar coming up at 11:30 that I've got to do for a NASA call. I'll be leaving at that time.
All right.
Okay, and just FYI, I cut and pasted it into IE, but then I had to click something about running a temporary application, and then now it works.
Yeah. All right. Everyone feeling pretty good now?
Now that that's all working, we can get back to the bad news. So let me just say a little bit about sort of the funding situation. So everybody knows we don't have an appropriations bill for this year. We're halfway through the fiscal year. The current continuing resolution goes till the end of April. We have no confidence that Congress will pass a full year appropriations bill at the end of April. There's been lots of discussions about pushing off another CR sometime into the summer. As you may recall, the President's full budget is not expected to be released until May, and so those two things together make me think that we probably won't have a full CR by the end of the current period. So there's a few consequences of that. We've been, and the situation with this, I can say that resolving the CR could have very significant budget effects on the Climate Science Center network. If you all are aware of the competition and funding for Landsat ground station work in USGS, if that gets resolved the wrong way, Climate Science Center network would take a 20 to 25% budget. That'll be really hard to take at the last half of the year. We're trying to navigate around a situation where we could have flat funding or we could take a really big hit. We're not allowed to start any new projects when we're under a continuing resolution. And given the uncertainty, we're not even funding the second or third year of ongoing projects unless there's a crisis. If you've got somebody who's going to run out of funding and get fired, then we need to know about it and we'll move that funding. But we've shut down all funding under fiscal 17, even the continuing activities, just because we need to hoard cash for the last half of the year. So no new starts, no payments to existing projects unless they're really in a crisis. We had been, and Jeff and Dennis had talked about FY17 research funding. Normally those have to be in to us by June because we need to put it in and get all the award processing done. We're not sure if we're going to be in a position to have a budget and ask for proposals in June. We're also being told that we're going to be encouraged greatly to minimize carryover. So we're going to find out late about how much money we have to spend, and we're going to be under harder than average rules about carrying funds over. It's going to be very hard for us to move in this environment, and it's going to be hard for us we won't know for quite a while how much dollar amounts to be, what the targets are for how much to be asking for these funding proposals. So Dennis will talk a bunch more about where he sees things going and some ideas for how to do that. We can't scale them yet just because we don't have those numbers. We just don't know when this is going to happen, and there is a distinct possibility, I'd say a high possibility, that there's no new research funding for 17. It may be that we have to pare back existing projects and only fund things that are absolutely necessary. So we're in a tighter than average period, and we're really trying to hoard funds so that we can understand what's happening. Next slide. So the award that we have that results in us being located at Colorado State ends in November. It has already been extended past its initial 5-year period. The plan is that, or the plan was that we would issue an RFP in June, and we would issue some kind of a bridge funding mechanism, a funded bridge, to take the award out to April when we think we'll be able to have a new award in place. So if we issued the RFP on June 1st, we could have it done by April 2018. At this point, we don't know whether we're going to be able to issue an RFP on June 1st. We haven't gotten enough priority information from the new folks. We don't know what we're doing in terms of overall funding because we don't have a continuing resolution. And I should say that we competed 3 awards this past year. So the Southeast, the Northwest, and Alaska CSC awards have been recompeted. We have not executed those awards because we invited them at a period when our budget perspective was much better. In fact, we gave them a target of $900,000, and they came in as usual at, $899.99. But we don't even think we can. We don't even know if we can afford to give them that money if it's going to eat into what we would give the next. So the North Central is part of the next year class, and we don't want to pay. Pay generously to the first ones that get recompeted and have no funds left for the ones at the latter end of the cycle of recompetes. So until we can figure out what we're able to give to all 8 CSCs, we're going to hold off and try to reduce the disparities in funding between CSCs, but also probably calibrate them to a sustainable level. In any case, it's likely to be an increase for Colorado State because the award here is one of the smallest awards, annual awards to host universities among the network. So even at less than 900, which would ask some of the CSEs to pull back, we would be getting an increase under that scenario anyway. I can't imagine it going down to the 400 or so that we've got currently.
Do we know who the selections for Northwest and Southeast, is that public?
They have not been made public.
Okay.
Those choices have been made, but not made public yet. And Alaska, hard to,
Right.
It's probably Alaska.
Right.
The dollar amount we'll work on, but yeah, there isn't, but the other 2 haven't been announced yet. Yep. And so we can figure out what what these budgets are, we can't really do that.
They said that until there's a signed contract in place, they can't make it public.
If I could just add to what Robin's been saying about our current budget situation, looking at our expenditures now within using the FY16 funds that we're operating on at the university level, and thinking about the FY17 allotment, whatever that might be. One thing that has been coming very strongly from the USGS leadership is that do no harm. And this means personnel actions. And so we're supporting as much as possible our research community, especially those at the sort of postdoc and graduate level, making sure that we support their efforts so that they can finish their deliverables. And so with that in mind, if there are certain situations, let us know soon. We may have a follow-up email or a telecon to actually go through this sort of case-by-case to line out what is sort of vulnerable out there, and so that we have a better idea of what vulnerabilities we're facing in this sort of resource-constrained time period.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And so if you are going to need a no-cost extension, start thinking about that soon. If you're seeing the end, the bottom of the barrel in terms of funding, start to engage us sooner rather than later. It doesn't look like it'll get any better for the next fiscal year budget situation, but the longer we have, the easier it is for us to find some workarounds for some of this stuff. So start hoarding cash and start thinking about when it will last to, and if those are within sight, then maybe we ought to have a discussion about managing around this next few months of period. So before we get to sort of where we go from here, there's one other thing I want to mention just because lots of folks are on the phone, and one of the things that I'm going to carry through here and you, especially folks who are PIs or what have you, will start to see some of this stuff. One of the things that I'm going to do is we're trying to close out projects. We got dinged a little bit by the Inspector General on the last audit. We've been audited several times, and so things like closeouts and getting deliverables and making sure we have all of our I's crossed and T's dotted, as it were, is going to be important. I drafted a note earlier today to an investigator, a researcher on one of our funded projects, and that said, we've been trying to get in touch with you to get data from you about this project. It's committed data in the data management plan. We haven't heard from you. We really need to hear from you about those data. We really need to get them. And the hammer is, we'll not fund a project in which you are an investigator until this is resolved. That's the rules. When we have people who we'll work with you as long as we can and as far as we can, and we'll climb out on the ledge with you. But if we don't get products, we're going to start instituting, and this is across multiple CSCs, a little bit of a harder edge that says we really need to get this stuff. And it's not because we like being mean, it's because we've got dinged for not following up on. People say they're going to give you something, did you get it? That's a responsibility of us as funders, and we haven't done it as maybe as rigorously as obviously the auditors think we should be doing. So the only thing we can do to anybody who doesn't give us something is to say we won't give you money next time. We can't, come and take your kids away or anything, but that's the consequence. And for those of you who are managing projects, you'll know that there's an investigator you can't bring onto your team if that hasn't been resolved. So I think the responsibilities of the major co-ops, maybe the FSA folks, the leads, maybe wasn't clear going into this, and we can take credit or blame for that as we will, but going forward, when we have big projects, if you're the lead, the shepherd, the PI for this, it falls into your area of responsibility to help us down that stuff and make sure it comes into us. Again, may not have been clear when we started this process, but I want to make it clear as we're going forward that when these things end up on lists of deliverables, we have to resolve them as either we got the deliverable or it turned out not to be relevant or useful or something. So help us work through being able to resolve these, do product delivery, and we'll all be happy, and funding will continue flowing. So, Dennis, you want to take over from here?
Sure. So, sir, these bullet points here are sort of derived from a number of conversations since last October when we had our fall CSC gathering here in Fort Collins, getting ready for the 5-year review, site review, getting our site review, our 5-year report together, and having our site review here in end of January, and hearing feedback from the review team. Sort of overall, they were really pleased with the type of research engagement that we've been fostering within our funded projects, and with how the foundational science areas have been working with different management entities in providing sort of useful information, actionable, in developing actionable science in the as we move forward with these projects. And so these were all sort of good points that they were able to see from your presentations and our interactions with them. So based on that, there's one, a comment that the review team came back with related to looking at how do we actually, sort of complete the end-to-end cycle of looking at working with various management entities, managers, how do we actually look at the end products and things. And so it got us thinking more directly about this whole engagement process and this sort of dialogue between the research community and managers in partnership in developing useful information exchange. What's, sort of thinking about that process of engagement and looking at, how do we do this and get this sort of embedded within the communities that we've developed projects with over the long term. That with or without the Climate Science Center's efforts, how do we look at the process of engagement and continue dialogue to where information and knowledge is shared between these communities. And so this first bullet point is really aimed at that, looking at how do we develop and maintain this engagement process. I think part of that will be looking at our various funded projects and the different members of those teams and having discussions with them about what worked, what doesn't work, how do we make this process take on its own sort of legs and carry forward, and see what the Climate Science Center needs to support in way of continuing these engagement activities. Another aspect of feedback from our discussions with the site review team was looking at issues of, how do you know you're effective? And it goes to a broader set of questions related to co-design, co-production of knowledge and information, looking at how we actually implement things that we call now actionable science. What are there metrics that we can use and, sort of to look at how effective we are, have we made an impact to these different communities, both in the research and the management communities. And so we're looking at ways of building upon some of the early work that we've done, leading into looking at these metrics, and building upon work that we've jointly done with the Western Water Assessment and Beth McNee, helping that effort, looking at the work that Beth and Shannon's been doing at the Wind River, and seeing how we could build upon those cases and expand them so that we can actually further enhance our metrics of how we evaluate our own success or failures. And last point there, in way of a sort of this FY17 proposal plan, is to look at what we've done within the foundational science areas in way of products, engagement process with the other projects, and trying to develop sort of or firm up the deliverable service areas in sort of in the climate, the impacts and adaptation areas, and really trying to sort of formalize some of those things that we've done so that we can continue to serve the community within our region. So those are the three main components of, I guess, the FY17 proposal idea. The budget range that I'm working on is sort of from $0 to $600K, and sort of planning in that range. And there's maybe an upper limit that might occur at the end of the fiscal year, just because of strange ways that budgets operate in the federal agencies at the end of the year. But we'll come back to that. So I guess I'll stop there and see if there's any feedback from the community here, those of you on the phone, and maybe, I know Geneva's on the phone, maybe highlight some of the LCC interactions as well, given that they've been thinking about some of the activities to support their efforts as well. So let me just pause there and open it up for questions or comments. If you're muted and talking, unmute. Okay.
Okay.
Well, go ahead.
Well, yeah. So for thinking alike on this, and Dennis came up with this slide, and if you can go to the next one. So the first and third items on that were really about, and I seem to be cutting off, oh, okay, there we go. So this was a little bit more detailed thought that I had. And I've been doing some work across the network and listening to stakeholders about what kinds of products they want from us and what sort of mechanisms they appreciate best. And I do a lot of work with state agencies and where they're fitting in. And so I think of this as taking the foundation that's built over a bunch of years, several large projects across from more fundamental to more really applied, and moving them further out and thinking hard about how to get them out into people's hands and heads. And so we did a bunch of surveys of state agencies and, frankly, webinars, workshops, and training courses. Synthesis publications, by far and away, are of more interest to at least state agencies than new research, by 3 to 1 in the surveys we did. Tell us what we already know. You all have learned a bunch of stuff in the past 5 years. Distill that down and build some things. So these are shorter-term things that are at the latter end of the research and science spectrum, moving them out. They also are tactically smart, I think, because they don't get us into any 3 to 5 year research program that needs a second year of X dollars or it fails. We're in a sort of unusual period, so it's smart to be able to be flexible and program 1 year at a time. So we can, and these are also ones you can ramp up and down. If we get a little bit of extra money at the end of the year, we can push it up. So thinking about stuff like this, and you know the details of what you have done, which of them could get poured into vehicles like this? Let's go around and do a set of training programs for all the state agencies in the region. The Southeast Center is doing a whole set of workshops for all of their states. Those kinds of things both move stuff out, get us credibility and visibility. So those sorts of things are in high demand, and it's smart for us to do them now. So
now this is very
a little more detail on.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page on some of these. And I think the strategy behind creating a very small, pithy FY17 proposal is that it's going to be highly modular, so that we can, sort of with a series of conversations with you all, we can actually set priorities, and be strategic about what is really mature, where we can move on quickly in way of looking at these workshops, looking at different processes relative to engagement. We have interest within the Climate Science Center, both Aparna and Jill Lackett, thinking about these metrics and probably working with Shannon and others to look at how do we actually do the evaluation metrics and road test it with these different discussions that we have, and do sort of a post hoc initial evaluation of where we are, so that we at the end of year 6, come into year 7, we can actually have a sort of a mini report on how we did, what the effectiveness across the region has been. There's a little, for those of you who have worked in fiscal budget cycles where there's been CRs, although this one is extremely unusual, there have been other unusual situations where you get backed up at the end of the year, and because of the way that people are uncertain of their budgets, they're hoarding funds within the agencies. I suspect that we'll come into July with a bolus of funds within the USGS that needs to be spent out by September, at least pushed out the door. And so in the way that we're structuring this from 0 to 600K with the upper limit probably at 999, because I think that's our cooperative agreement limit is $1 million. That gives us a cushion that the heads up is have some small synthesis projects or workshop projects in mind that might be in the 50 to 100K level, that if there's a request for expenditures, that we have those to put on the table, saying, among our community, we have said that we need this. This would be very helpful. If the data, a synthesis of a data, or reanalysis of something that can be done, grouped together to develop a synthesis product. Those are things that will be very useful to have in the back pocket as we move into the summer, because I suspect that come July, September, we're going to be probably seeing some requests like this, and I think there's going to be some change sitting around for us to pick if we're strategic about it.
And I think even having those ideas on this smaller scale, so you've done this 2-year project, you have this data set, you just need 10K to offer a training to the National Park Service. So having that in your pocket, just put on the table.
Yep.
And I wonder how much of that could potentially then be rolled into the rebid as well, if it doesn't happen. And
it's too late. I mean, some of that's going to be too late. Right?
Maybe not, though.
Well, the ideas could be.
The ideas.
Some of those strategies should be,
Okay. Yeah.
So if it doesn't get funded in the FY17 pot, there's a possibility it could still get funded. More incentive for people to do it.
And this is Robin again, I think the point, Dennis is exactly right. The point is that we're not going to have a lot of time to respond to these, so having a half a page with some numbers on it that you can, pull up quickly. At some point, we'll have to assemble a proposal, we assume, that, with a few of those things. So be thinking about it now, or even write something down now, because you might not have a lot of time for it later.
And then part of the process too, and this goes back to the outcome bullet in a previous page, where part of the outcome is really looking at what's our vision and strategic plan for the next 18 to 24 months. And I guess there's 2 reasons for this. Is one, we've lived through the revamp concept for the last 5 years. It's been very helpful. We don't want to throw that away or start someplace new, but we do want to, I think, take the opportunity at this point to really assess what has really succeeded, what needs still to be done, and how to enhance that over the next 24 months. And also, I guess another outcome is this would be a mechanism to where Robin and Aparna can really get into meeting you all, looking into more of the details of what was really the theory and concepts behind revamp. And then as things stabilize, let's say 2-3 years from now, we can actually look at a full up revision of the science plan. But I think right now in this interim period, it's more of a looking back evaluation, self-evaluation of where we are, what we need to do to sort of solidify what we've started. So that's in the process of this whole sort of set of dialogues that will be going on in the next 6 months or so, as we look at some of these activities and doing some of these activities with the FY17 funds in hand.
So, Robin, again, it's just one caveat as we go into this whole process. At some point, when we start to write, when we issue an RFP for the re-proposal, those of us who are USGS feds particularly have to stay out of the conversations that are in any way detailed. We can be very broad and general, but when it comes down to things that actually get written in the proposal, we've got to stay back. So some of these bigger conversations that are outside of the context of a particular RFP response, we can help be part of those conversations so that when we have to close it off and leave you guys alone to write the proposal, you've gotten at least, we've had those conversations up front.
So, but in some ways, in my mind, looking at revamp 2 is different than the recompete.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
because that's more looking at our operational strategy with the current structure, which is you know, at least quasi-independent of the rebid process.
Yep.
So again, at this point, any comments, feedback about things that are ongoing? So JJ's not here, right?
Yeah, Dennis, Amanda here. I'd just like to hear you guys talk a little bit about, you know, given the kind of current environment, I know we've been working pretty closely with the RISAs and the hubs, but especially on some of these more bigger picture metrics, actionable science. I know both of those conversations are happening within the RISA network and within the hub network, and wanted to just hear ideas or thoughts or from anybody, but particularly Dennis and Robin, about how that might be working as we're trying to not duplicate but really be complementary, especially going forward.
I think, you know, in our past retreats, we've been talking about aspects of this and really trying to make it more explicit about, you know, how we might move forward both on the metrics and sort of coordination on actionable science. I think what you raised, though, might be a really focal discussion that we have at the next retreat in June. And try to organize, you know, a session around that.
Yeah, so this happens to be one of my hobby horses, and coming out here could be seen as a detour from the work I was doing on this back at home, but it is more likely an advance on it. So we've been hanging out in this enterprise with really lame performance metrics. We have the standard performance metrics that count how many projects we do and how many graduate students we support, yada, yada. Doesn't have anything about outcomes or even outputs in many ways. It's just inputs more than anything. We've started some work on this, and frankly, the LCC community got taken to the cleaners by the national academies on the fact that their performance metrics didn't mesh well with their strategic plan. I was really happy that they found the LCCs first, because we didn't have a strategic plan and we have really lame performance metrics, and I don't want to be beat up by the NRC. So I want to take action to avoid getting in that situation, because it must have been uncomfortable. But we've now identified, and we have a bunch of pilots going on around the country that take on two different conceptual strategies for measuring actionable science. And I think what we do here in the North Central can fit in, and probably should fit in, with some larger discussions across not only the CSC network, but as you said, the hubs and the RISA stuff. And those two conceptual models are, you can look at the process by which you produce the science. If you do good consultation and work closely with your user, you'll probably make more actionable stuff. Or you could ask the user whether it was useful or not. Two very different things. Each of them has conceptual and measurement problems and practicality problems. How much does it cost to actually get the information? But what I've been trying to do is see if we can have tests of both of those strategies and then see which one the network would better work with. So we're working for ourselves here, but also thinking about evolving this for the overall network. So I think we've got some running start on this and some people involved, and so I think we'll be able to take some...
Is it an either-or thing, or can you do both? To me, it's both.
Absolutely. And we've thought about doing some, you know, maybe you do a survey every 5 years, and it's a repeatable statistical sample, and, you know, you spend a lot of time and effort on it, and you do some other things in the meanwhile. That's exactly where we need to go with this. But it's not an either-or. We've had some direction that equates co-development with actionability. That's not a complete congruence, and so we just want to think about some of the other strategies that pick up some of the other work.
This is Geneva. Is this an okay time to chime in?
Sure.
And Dennis, I did, thank you for asking about LCCs earlier. But I just wanted to give a quick update that in general, and this is through discussions with Robin and Aparna, but there were some charges incurred by the Liaison Project early in the fiscal year that the Climate Science Center did cover, which was some salary and travel. But from, at least the start of this calendar year forward, we are not incurring any or not making any of their charges, but we do have people continuing. Basically, our objective is to continue developing communications and collaborations with the LCCs at no charge to the Climate Science Center. And I think this potentially ties in to what you're talking about right now, in the sense that one concept of the Liaison Project was to have direct USGS and University Consortium, Jill is a liaison also, connection to the LCCs so that we can be sort of next to them as they work on their RFPs and, expand and improve the type of work that gets proposed to them through their solicitations, by people knowing that they can potentially partner with the Climate Science Center. And so, for example, the Great Northern LCC, through their proposal process, we participated on their information calls, and we were contacted by some of the PIs responding to their solicitation. Now, unfortunately, they're in the same DOI boat, or, whatever government boat, and I did just ask Yvette if she had any update, and she doesn't. They're also in a holding pattern. But long story short, because some USGS scientists have base salary, and we are on, we were on the proposal to represent the CSC, you are still getting, you can still use us, I guess, is the bottom line. We have people attending steering committee meetings and continuing their participation on science committees and things like that. So we're still an open communications venue, so that, I think you can hold it up as an example of ways to not only avoid duplication of work, but to leverage and enhance work that does get done by, putting in and putting side by side climate science capacity.
That's very helpful to hear, and thanks for the commitment that the LCC reps are putting into the effort. It's really an important partnership that we're developing. I guess along those lines, though, it's something that we might actually talk to our other joint stakeholder committee members, and something that maybe Robin and Aparna could think about is how do we, are there talking points, or we've been having this dialogue with folks on the Hill during the whole Climate Science Center process. There's another visit that is happening this week at Oklahoma. Renee and McPherson and Varian Moore and myself are going this week to the Hill, and we put together some, sort of talking points to Hill. But I think there's something to think about for the Joint Advisory Committee to see, as we look at, the NOAA, the EPA, the USDA, the DOI efforts, are there major points that we want to make that the universities can carry forward? Because, we're all trying to work toward the same goal of really supporting the communities in our region. And I think we've been effectively hearing good feedback from these university visits to the Hill, but I think having more, sort of talking points from the other agencies that we can bring forward in support of this whole enterprise of looking at how to respond to climate change would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, Jeff, this is Diane. I'm just thinking if we can come up with some examples of the adaptations that we're recommending, you know, across these different projects, and if we could have good stories about how these adaptations have been beneficial over the past, it's been a short period of time, but you know, if you get a big rainstorm and we've done some kind of adaptation, can we measure the mitigation value of that or something like that? I think those kind of stories would be valuable if we could pull them together.
Yeah, there are several that we could pull together, and we've been trying to highlight them in some of these brochures, but I think getting some of those from you all who've been on, you know, worked with the managers and identifying, you know, what has been useful from that we're trying to collect those stories.
Yeah, there's an active effort underway from headquarters, and so Lindsay's really the link here, but things that talk about hunted or fishable critters, things that talk about economic impacts, infrastructure impacts, framing things in a risk-based context, things that we can get that apply that. And Diane, if we do have adaptations strategies that we've recommended or helping people develop, even if they're not implemented, if we can name the who, the who is often more important than the exact what. So if we're working with Wyoming Fish and Game, you know, that's an important thing, even if we don't have a total success that we can, you know, document quantitatively yet.
Okay, that sounds good. And I guess I'll put a plug in again for in the Midwest, we're working with a lot of these state agencies, and you know, it doesn't fit into the DOI box as well, but in Midwestern places, we've got organizations like Missouri Department of Conservation and Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and they're not part of DOI, but they're collaborating with Fish and Wildlife Service. So these are the people on the ground who are doing kind of the local scale things. So I think talking about those associations is also valuable, particularly in the Midwest.
I think we're seeing the same thing up in Montana, where the state and the feds working together, particularly in that southwest Montana, upper Missouri headwaters, is really where the kind of leveraging off of each other is really resulting in some neat things happening.
So a couple things. Folks who know me will know that states are my favorite group of entities, and so I agree completely. I would argue that, and we in fact have been having this discussion through the overall network about who our stakeholders are. And yeah, we were created by the Department of the Interior, and we're funded by the Department of the Interior. But it is not possible for that department to do its work without deep engagement with the states. The states own all the critters, except the ones who are listed, and they manage huge amounts of land. So I don't like to draw a line between serving the needs of Interior and serving the needs of states. I feel the same way about tribes. It's a slightly different set of reasons, the history and the moral and legal responsibilities we have. But when I say who we serve resource managers at federal, state, and tribal levels, because none of them can exist on their own. And so if you get Interior, you get the states and you get the tribes, and you ought to be thinking about it that way. So I don't draw those lines. I'm going to try to strengthen this center's relationship with the states. We've got the advisory committee, this oversight group, the joint group, doesn't have states on it. It has the LCCs. I want to make sure the states are as aware of us in this region and supportive as they are in the Midwest. And they've been very helpful to us in the Midwest. So I'm going to work on that too.
Sounds good.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour. It's about 11:50. So I don't know if there's any additional major comments or minor comments to share. I think with this process that we have in this sort of budget uncertainty, we have been discussing the procedure of developing the response to a work statement that will describe FY17 opportunities for the North Central Climate Science Center. It's going to be sort of somewhat generic but modular. I'm hoping if there's any additional thoughts that you have based on the presentations or ideas within the FY17 activities, please send those along to me and to others here at the Climate Science Center. We'll incorporate those ideas and then we'll start sharing a document with you all in early April. So starting next week, you might start seeing draft bullets of what we are thinking about in way of activities, expanding on the two slides that we showed about the FY17 considerations. Then once we get clearance of some of the budget issues, then we'll start then pushing paper. Shannon has a comment.
Yeah, so I had a few different ideas for existing projects that we might support through this mechanism, and we don't have time to go into all of them, but one being the Colorado BLM project, getting the science out to the field offices and resource management planning projects, as well as scaling it up and out to other states throughout the region and potentially nationally. The other one being the Southwest Colorado project and this possible collaboration we've been talking about between the GMUG, the Gunnison, or the Grand Mesa and Capagua-Gunnison Forest Service Planning Update, and the BLM RMP coming up that's going to be updated. So those are a couple ideas, but the one I really wanted to highlight is the fact that to keep in mind that we do have this new tribal liaison coming on board at some point. We still don't know when that's going to be. That's BIA supported. There's been some contractual issues that have been slowing that down a little bit. But that person is going to need people to liaise with, and those people are going to need funding to do that. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind is how can we help support that person in their efforts. I personally have been getting a lot of input and feedback from tribal representatives throughout the region of wanting support, wanting more opportunities for collaborations and meetings and workshops and things like that. And we keep saying, we've got the liaison coming on board, just wait, we'll be able to have more capacity, but that person's not going to be able to do it alone. So thinking about how we support that person, and if anybody has, I know several people who are on the call have been involved in projects where they have tribal folks who are interested in the project, but it's just not quite the right fit, and they don't quite have the right resources to actually see that through. So think about what those needs have been and how we can help support closing those loops as well, and actually getting science to the tribes to help their efforts, especially now that a lot of the BIA-supported projects have been spinning up and are in implementation phase. The needs are growing for them to have these kinds of synthesis products, but tailored for their needs. So I just wanted to make sure we highlighted that, because that's a big thing that's going to be coming online soon.
Great, thanks.
So Dennis, Robin, this is Lawrence. So I think you've done a really nice job of building up a strategy, working in a fairly uncertain budget environment. But I think some of the things that come out of what Shannon just said is looking at your second FY17 slide, where you look at your strategy to provide tools and products to help users apply a science. It might be beneficial if you're a little more specific in naming your users. So that it's easier to show the benefit. That's the one feedback I have.
Great. Yeah, my assumption would be that for any particular project, it would point towards a certain set of users, tribal users or state folks or what have you. But no, you're absolutely right.
And or set of decisions, a set of management or decision issues that are going on that might have multiple users around a set of decisions.
But being clear about that. Makes sense.
Exactly. Yep, thanks.
One final point I'd make, which we forgot on the first slide, is that you all went through the have a draft of that for review by both the feds here and the university side folks in May. We're trying to get that done before what would ostensibly be the RFP release date in June. So, but it's going to go through committee review first, and then we'll get a crack at it. So sometime in May, we'll have that back to you.
Any other comments?
Dennis, could you send out just the text of those 2 slides that have the activities, the proposed activities?
Sure. Yep.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Well, thanks for your attention, participation. Stay tuned. Things will be happening, I think, in a couple weeks.
And if you have any questions for me, reach out, please. I'm trying to get on it, so any of those would help.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.